Well, defense analyst Ubay Shahbanda joins me in the studio now. Thanks for coming on set, Ubay. Now, we haven't heard Trump speak about Syria for a very long time. So what do you think is behind this tweet, which was very, very harsh in tone and content?
It was a very harsh tweet, but it was very focused. And what's so interesting and significant about President Trump's tweet on Syria was that it was not only a warning intended for Bashar al-Assad of Syria, but it was also a warning to the Russians and to the Iranians, of course, whose military forces continue to support Bashar al-Assad and his various militias and military forces in Syria. But we've seen such rhetoric before from the United States. Let's not forget that in April of this year, after a chemical weapons strike by Bashar al-Assad against Syrian civilians in Damascus, now the United States launched military strikes, but ultimately to no avail. While the Assad regime may have been tactically punished, the regime was able to clear and capture territory around Damascus and eventually in southern Syria in violation of de-escalation zone deals that were agreed upon between Trump and President Putin. So now the question is, will there be any action backed by the rhetoric and by these tweets? We'll just have to wait and see. But certainly the precedence does not bode very well on whether or not the U.S. can actually back its rhetoric and its warnings with some real tangible action.
Absolutely. And we've seen a flurry of diplomatic activity over the past week. Do you think this can be stopped at all, an assault on Idlib? Because just to quote the Syrian regime foreign minister who said they're going to go all out on Idlib.
Now, Damascus has been very clear that they want to recapture all of the territory that are controlled by the rebels and that are outside the control of Bashar al-Assad. And we've seen the regime slaughter its way all the way from southern Syria to the northern tip in Syria. So this is a regime that's really capable of anything. Now, diplomatically, we have a couple of tracks that may hopefully solve this problem. Turkey, Russia, and Iran are meeting in Tehran this week, and they're going to meet again in Geneva, hosted by the United Nations next week. Hopefully, these diplomatic tracks can stop and prevent a mass slaughter, a mass offensive by the Assad regime backed by the Russian Air Force. Whether or not chemical weapons will be in use is another question. We do know that the National Security Advisor, Bolton, met with his Russian counterparts in Geneva last week and warned them that the United States had intelligence, specifically that the Assad regime was prepared to use those chemical weapons. Now, of course, Russia denies that, but what we have here is potentially a mass humanitarian catastrophe in the making. Turkey is sitting down with the Russians and with the Iranians, hoping to prevent all that from happening through a diplomatic track.
And let's talk a bit more about Turkey. And there are high-level U.S. officials visiting Turkey today. Why and what do you expect to come out of these talks?
Now, it's interesting to see President Trump sending that tweet right as two senior U.S. officials focusing on Syria and Syria engagement land in Turkey. We have the former U.S. ambassador to Turkey, Jane Jeffrey, along with Joel Rayburn, a senior State Department official. They're sitting down with Turkey today to discuss what could potentially happen in Syria. So those talks are going to continue in Ankara as the Iranians, Russians, and Turkey sit down and try to negotiate a peaceful way out of this horrible mess for the Syrian people.
Absolutely. 3 million there. And we've also heard Turkey, of course, warning to be very careful with those civilians there.